Okay, so we have a map, right? World map. And I ask
Yeah,
you, where is Australia, right? You kind of have
yeah,
an idea where it is on the map, bottom right
yeah,
hand corner, right?
yeah,
And so
yeah,
Alaska's top left hand corner, South America's kind of like a little off to the left.
yeah,
You can picture it, right? My
yeah.
question is, you and I, worlds apart, how do we see the same map? How do we have, because there is no flat version of the Earth where Australia sits in the bottom right hand corner. You and I both put in the same place. So where did that come from? And where did that mental model arrive from? And if you go back far enough,
You're thinking of building a company or already run a company that is not registered, but you want to get registered. I've looked at a lot of solutions, and one of the best ones in the market right now is Doula. I reached out to Arjun, who is actually the founder of Doula.com. I asked him if he'd like to work together on the podcast. He was like, of course. Doula is sort of a platform that helps founders and businesses form and manage US companies, regardless of where they live. If someone is living in India, for example, and wants to start a company and get it registered in the US, he or she can do it by using Doula.com. Doula helps in forming the company. It can be an LLC, C Corp, or you name it. Doula offers a US address and a bank account to users, which can allow you to conduct business transactions that you can receive and send payments no matter where you live in the world from the United States. And other than that, they also provide tax consultation to the users, which is an incredible feature. And Doula simplifies the process of establishing and managing a US company, and especially for founders that are not in the US. And regardless of where they live, you can get your company registered with Doula.com. To check out Doula, go to doula.com/exerton. That is DOOLA.com/EXERTON.
So, hey Martin, how are you? Hope you're doing well.
yeah, doing great. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a very long time, and I'm so glad we got this chance to do this. Let's start with who is Martin? Who are you?
Yeah, who had like owner of a dog, liver in New York. But I think, to the spirit of context of this conversation, I'm a designer, started my career as a designer. Really started undergrad as a computer science major. So a designer that knew how to code back in the early 2000s, which was unique back then. But then more relevant, became an entrepreneur, kind of fell into it. And then now I'm an addict, constantly building companies and bringing people together to solve big problems. But I think that's me.
How do you think has design evolved over time? From like when you got into startups to how it is now?
Yeah, so we were limited by what was possible in the canvas. A lot of us in the early 2000s, we fundamentally believed if you could dream it, someone somewhere could build it. So it made good designers push the boundaries of what was possible. And I think that ultimately pushed the boundaries of what was possible. So we got a lot of cool things out of HTML5, CSS3, transforms, animations, the power of things we can do with SVGs now. None of that existed before, but that only exists because some designer somewhere said, hey, what if? What if it could do this? What if it could do that? What if it could do it on the front end? So that's evolved a lot. But now I think we never even have this conversation anymore. Yeah, anything you design can be built. But before we actually had to fight that argument. So I think that's probably the big change between now and then.
But that's more like a fundamental change. What was the surface level change that?
Yeah, well, I think, when I go back far enough, there was this huge separation between structure, presentation, and interaction, the three layers. Today, those have all kind of converged into one. Today, now it's, context dependent, like a lot of interactions and experiences where this is what I think it's a funny anecdote because nobody likes to talk about it, but you have to design an experience for somebody who's sitting on a toilet. Like that wasn't true 20 years ago, right? Where a lot of no one likes to admit that they take this little thing into the bathroom because it's gross and disgusting, but everyone that's watching, you all do it. You all know you do it. We don't talk about it. You certainly don't clean it after you're done. But that means that people, what are they doing? Like in the bathroom, they're looking at their stocks. They're buying and trading stocks. Like you couldn't do that 20 years ago. They're looking for their life partner while they sit there. And then, yeah, I'm just being a little exaggeratory with the bathroom comment because it evokes a reaction. It's so gross, but you do it when you sit on the subway for 5 minutes. You do it when you stand in line at the grocery line. Because we're never bored, and there's never 5 minutes of boredom. If you're bored for 5 minutes, you pull out your phone and you exercise that time. Now, there's other issues with that, screen time and addiction and all that, but in terms of like designing in interfaces and product, you have to think about like how is your product used in those 5 minute intervals.
How do you design for that 5 minute interval?
I just think you think about, well, one, you do it. So what would you do? How would you do it differently? And then you just start thinking, who is your user? What classic product development task is jobs to be done. So what job do they have to get done? How much time do they have to get it done? And then we're constantly thinking now, what is the patience level? We get bored fast. And that's getting smaller and smaller over time. Another example I'll use just because it evokes a reaction. If you go back, to the late 90s, early 2000s, the porn industry, you weren't streaming video. You were downloading a picture of somebody who's naked on the internet. But it took anyone who was 15 at the time will remember this. But it took like 7 minutes to download, and you would just get little bits of a JPEG show up. And you'd see like a head and an eyeball, and then eventually you'd see more. But like we had the patience to sit there. 15-year-olds across the world had the patience to wait 7 to 8 minutes to see this photograph, right? Because they wanted what was on the other side. Now you'd never wait 5 or 7 minutes to do anything. You won't buffer a movie. Like if I want to watch House of Dragons on my phone, from my pocket, on the subway, 50 feet underground, I'm upset, if it takes more than 2 seconds to load up. So things have changed. Our patient levels have changed.
Is that really a part of design or the evolution of technology?
I mean, to me, it's a part of the experience. It's a part of your relationship with that experience, and that is design. To me, like when you personally interact with something, there's feedback. You give it something, you expect something back, or vice versa. That's design. The experience is, because it's not just the visual aesthetic. Is it pretty or not? Is it pleasing or not? Like that's not design. What's design is my relationship and how I feel about my relationship after I've had an interaction with something. So the content is design, the architecture is design, the security infrastructure is design. That's all part of the design because that's part of my interaction.
What creates good design then?
Great designers create good design, but that's the easy answer. Is just most people who do design are not great designers. They just have that title. So what leapfrogs between just somebody who's got a copy of Figma and self-described themselves on LinkedIn as a designer to a great designer? There's a few cliche things people will say. Empathy, and I think if you were to extract what that means, it's taking yourself out of the equation. We always say there's this thing N=1 where your opinion's kind of irrelevant. If a designer says, well, I would never do that, or I would do this, instantly they're a bad designer because it's irrelevant what you would do. What would the greater audience do? What would the one-off edge case do? Be able to think in multiple edge cases at once. Have you ever watched these Marvel movies where they talk about like the multiverse and you see them like jumping between different scenarios all at the same time? Like it's kind of what a great designer has to do. They have to think, how would 50 different users with 50 different tasks all approach the exact same problem and do it in different ways? And then you got to account for it all and make sure that they all have a really great experience. That's a very difficult thing to do. That only comes with, one, you need great taste, and that I don't think can be taught. That's a little bit like internal, but beyond that, just experience and pattern recognition. You see enough. I always make a joke for anyone that's in a relationship or married. You got to tell your partner that you have to have Tinder, Grindr, Bumble on your phone because it's research. Like you got to know what are the newest, hottest apps doing, and you've got to know because like when Tinder first came out in 2011, you have to know that swipe right and swipe left means something. It didn't mean something before 2011. Today, if I say swipe left, that means bad. Swipe right means good. Tinder gave us that. So now I need to know what that means, right? I need to know that that's an expectation of a user. To move something to the left is bad and dismissal. To move something to the right is acceptance and good, and there's a match that occurs. And so if you've been married for 5 years by the time Tinder hits, and you're not on Tinder because you're not single, like you've missed out on a very important moment in time and a very important interaction layer. You've done you and your users a disservice. So all the married, happy people and happy relationships out there, you gotta be on the dating apps. I don't say you have to be on all the porn sites, because sometimes porn does lead the industry. Not so much anymore since generative AI, but you got to know what's happening. You got to be aware of it. And you have to be an optimist, not a pessimist. You have to look at everything with eyes wide open and say, okay, there's a new paradigm shift here. There's a new interaction layer here, and I need to be aware of it.
I should add a disclaimer to this one that please do not take any relationship advice from this show.
Yeah. I'm not a financial advisor, not a relationship coach. Most of my past relationships are not.
No, I'm just kidding. But it's like you talk about taste back then. I've had a lot of people too. Everyone that I've asked about taste has sort of like a different definition of taste. What does taste mean to you?
To me, taste only comes. It's. I think it's irrelevant what anybody answers. All that matters is the person on the other side of that relationship. Their reaction is what matters. Taste. So you could walk in with let's just talk about fashion. You could walk in with the worst outfit I've ever seen, and I could be like, "Oh, you have bad taste." That doesn't matter. What was the purpose of the outfit? If it was to walk into a bar and to get a girl's attention, the only thing that matters about the outfit is, did you get her attention? Yes or no? If you got her attention with a really bad outfit because it was so bad that it worked, right? Like, I don't care about taste. If you didn't get her attention because it was so bad, then it was bad, and it was bad taste. If you wore a suit and tie to get an interview for a job, did the suit and tie, were you overdressed? Then it was bad taste. If you didn't wear the tie and you were underdressed, then it was bad taste. But the tie itself is irrelevant. What matters is the person who interviewed you. Were they expecting a tie or not? And what kind of tie? Did they want a suit jacket? This is what matters for taste. So to me, it's the reaction and the response you get from the intended audience. That's good taste. And then I think that's, for a lot of people, there's a lot of tricks you can use to win. And so there's things, especially like in the English language, juxtaposition, alliteration, like these are tools where when you have two letters, like the alien animal, and if they both start with the letter A, it turns out that we respond better to that. So if we know these tricks, these bag of tricks, we can use these things to make people click now, buy here, don't churn, retain. We can get them to do the things we want. We can move the needle. And so this is the power of a designer, to get someone to click the button we want them to click, to read the copy we want them to read, and to take the action we want them to take.
I'll go back to the earlier one, the second last one. It's Rick Rubin talks a lot about these. I don't know if you know him. I mean, he's quite popular. Rick Rubin, the music news.
Yeah.
He talks a lot about taste. What you said earlier is, and in some ways it's contradictory. I'll just run it by you. It's the way that,
because you're going to reference a quote from somebody in the music industry who produces music. I might make the argument that they would call themselves an artist, not a designer.
Yeah.
And I would say the biggest difference between art and design is art, generally speaking, the audience is you. You're creating it for yourself. That is art. Less what anyone else. And I think design is mostly for sales, marketing, and persuasion. Right? And so design is more of a marketing advertising, closer to marketing advertising than it is to art. And while there are things that are close to art in design, that's the separator. And so I would say, we should be in contradiction if you're talking about art.
Exactly. That was exactly what I wanted to ask. But it's why do some designers treat their work as art then?
They get, I would say most of the ones that do that, they're junior, they're younger, and like they're going to listen to this and be like, I'm not junior. Or look at their LinkedIn's and you've been working for 40 years, still junior. Yes, I get it. Someone paid you something and they let you call yourself senior designer. That does not mean that you're senior. It means that someone gave you that title, but you're still only 4 years out. That means your pattern recognition. I'm 22 years in. My pattern recognition is just significantly better than now. You might be arguably a better artist than me, maybe even a better designer than me. You don't have better pattern recognition just because our years are way off. And I've done a lot more in my 2 decades. So I think that does a lot of it. But yeah, it's mostly just experience and pattern recognition that leads you to these like greater design outcomes.
I just did the schedule for this one. This is interesting. How do you develop this pattern recognition?
Yeah, well, you have to be open to it. You have to know to look for it and absorb it. And then you have to let it like consume you and become a part of you. The way I always explain it, there was this psychology study that was done years ago about luck. And it forever changed my outlook on the world. And it looked at people who were lucky and unlucky, traditionally in life. And they had this like one example of a few people who were just always unlucky. And this one woman, like on one day, she misses her alarm clock. She's rushing out to get to work. She steps in a pothole, twists her ankle, gets to the job late, gets fired because she's late, goes home early, catches her husband cheating on her, all on the same day. Very unlucky person. But if you actually look at it all, right, she's rushing out the door because she's already been late to work like 10 times. So she knows if she's late 11 times, she's getting fired. That's why she's rushing. And because she's rushing, she's not seeing the pothole, right? And the reason that she's late to work 10 times is because she's having marital problems. And she's arguing with her husband all night long. And she's not getting any sleep, and yelling and screaming. That's why he's having the affair, or they're arguing about the affair, right? So they're all interconnected. They're all tied together. But the important part is, because of all these other things going on, this person, they don't see the pothole in front of them. That's why they step into it. That's why they twist their ankle. Right? That means that they're probably not seeing other. They're not seeing things in their relationship. I'm not saying that this is why their relationship is bad or why the person's having a marital affair, but like there's certain things they're not seeing that they're blinded to. And so I think about that in my career. I need to make sure that I'm open to all the possibilities. I'm seeing everything. So when I look at Tinder, it's not about finding a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It's about like every pixel choice they made and every interaction choice they made and the words they use. And as a designer, I'm taking that all in. So if I go into a shopping mall and I go into like a Nordstrom's or a Lord & Taylor, like I'm looking at everything. Even if I'm not shopping for like my own outfit, I'm still going by the women's section. I'm seeing like, what are the colors they put out? What are the things that are in fashion or out of fashion? What's on sale that means that it's not in fashion anymore if it's coming off this trend season? Like, I want to know all that. I want to go into a Starbucks and look at like the color choices they use and the typography they're using. It's like, okay, when I take all that in, I start to see patterns. Oh, Starbucks is doing the same thing that I saw Taco Bell do, which is the same thing I saw Macy's do. It's like, okay, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? Why do I think it's working? And then it all starts to set in.
How do you know that, like, it's sort of a weird question, but how do you know they're doing the same thing for the same purpose?
Yeah, right. So at first, well, I mean, that's to me like literally in pattern recognition, right? Recognizing the pattern. I'm seeing the same thing over and over again, and it's on you to be open to seeing those. And I think you just have to start being good at like, because you might use a different word. You might use like copying. Hey, everyone's copying each other. Like, no, there's you see if you go to like, I don't know, websites for startups, they all kind of look the same now. They all have the same kind of parallax. Everyone uses inner. It's like, why? Why are they using inner? Like, inner is irrelevant. They're all using a sans serif. So why is the sans serif better? Like,
linear is the linear design.
That's right. And then before that, it was the stripe design. And before that, it was, everybody copied AOL back in the early 90s. So it's like, but like, why? Like, why does it work? Why does certain kind of iconography work or certain style work? And then styles change over time. We had skeuomorphic design, which is really big in the early versions of the iPhone. Now everything kind of went 3D for a minute. Now everything's back to flat. Maybe AI will change things back to 3D again. We're seeing a lot more motion. A lot more motion designers are coming to to the limelight. So I want to notice the pattern, and then I want to kind of ask, be inquisitive as to why. Why are we seeing this? Why is this happening?
Do you really like do that? Does it naturally come to you that you look at things and you develop patterns out of them, or has it developed over time?
Yeah, I mean, I see the net benefit of it over time, and so it makes me more aware of it, and it makes me want to seek it out because I know that I have there's a value there. But now, sometimes it's a little exhausting. Like if I'm with you and we're at dinner together and I stare off into space, you might say, "Hey, what are you thinking about?" The answer, you don't really want the answer. I'll give you some other answer, like, "Oh, I was thinking about work." If I really told you, I was like, "Oh, I'm looking at that chandelier against that paint. I'm realizing like the way that light hits that purple, like that shade of purple is really interesting. And like it goes really, there's a woman sitting there in a green dress, and that light purple with that green, like looks really good together, right?" And that's something where like it hits me. I put it in the back of the brain, and when I go to a color palette, like a year and a half later, I end up taking like that purple with that green, I push them together because I remember it, and I compartmentalize it and say, "Hey, there's a color palette." I mean, but this means that like it's a constant. Any room I'm in, any place I'm in, but it's like, like when you're in the shower and you didn't realize you were thinking about a problem, it just kind of sits there in the back. You get better at it over time because you also have to be really good at dismissing things. Like don't keep the garbage in your head.
But then, if you go on then like the chandelier point, if I touch on that, then in that sense, people who have does good design only come with experience. What I mean is like people who are new to design, new in designing product. Through that logic, are they naturally like terrible at it?
I think there's some people who have. Well, I think to be a great designer, you have to have a natural eye for design. I've never met a great designer who didn't, in their DNA, they were born with an eye for design. So I've never seen anyone learn that where they just didn't have it naturally. So anyone that feels like they don't have it, my best advice, and nobody wants to hear this, is different profession. But like do something tangentially where like design is important. Like become a software engineer, and software engineers that know design, super valuable to me. I'd love that. I just don't think you're going to be a great designer. And you could be, senior designer at Oracle because they'll give you the title and like not a lot's expected of you. But like again, I don't think that doesn't make you a great designer. Not to say that there aren't great designers at Oracle, but so if you want to be, a great designer, I think in your DNA, an eye for design lives in there. And, it's dormant, and you have to do a lot of things to really get it to come out. It's deep down in that nature versus nurture kind of thing. And then for your question, if you're earlier in your career, I do think it is pattern recognition and experience. And you might say, again, if I'm 22 years in and you're only 4 years in, you're like, well, what's the diff between those two? Isn't just, working for 18 years. It's all of like the side projects and side. So like when a designer comes to me, they have no portfolio. That's not a great designer, because a great designer can't turn it off. They're designing all the time, every day. They are in Figma, Illustrator, Photoshop, whatever your tool of choice is. They're constantly designing and they're making something, even if it's not for a client. So any designer that's ever told me, "Hey, I can't show you my portfolio because it's all under NDA," bullshit. Great designers have 1,000 logos they made for companies that will never exist. They saw the new Pepsi logo and threw up, and they made their own version. They never sent it to Pepsi, just sat there on their desktop. I want to see that. They made their own website just because they hated Framer templates or Wix templates. They just couldn't live with it. They had to have something better, and they knew that they could do it. They were meticulous about their own resume. It had to have the perfect font, the perfect font size. They designed that thing, and they made it 8.5 by 11. They made it no more than 2 pages. They thought about every pixel. Like they do not tell me that your designs were covered by NDA. That just means you're not a great designer. They're a great designer. They designed their friend's tattoo. They designed their mom's kitchen renovation. They design everything because they can't help themselves.
It's like I think that goes beyond design too. Like people who really want to be great, they just don't turn it off. From what I think.
Yeah, and I just think that means you're not deep down. You're calling yourself a designer. You're not a designer. A real designer, a great designer. They can't turn it off. There's no other way. And there's a bunch of people out in the world they do not call themselves designers. And I don't think they know. I don't think they know inside of them, burrowing is a great designer. And just no one's ever told them. They never had the right class. They didn't get the right art teacher in 7th grade, and it set them down this wrong. There's a great designer living in there, and you can see it and spot it. And you're just like, oh man, we can just teach that to take mine or be a rock star. But the inverse is true. You get a lot of people who call themselves designers. They're not. They are pixel pushers. They can recognize something that they know somebody else designed. They can mimic it. They can modify it, put it in front of you, and of course you're going to like it because they saw something they liked and somebody else did. But that's not design. That's modification, execution of somebody else's design for your own benefit.
Are you a great designer?
Well, I don't think anyone who's great at anything is allowed to call themselves great, but I will say that I've had the fortune of working with great designers. And I think that's made me a better designer. So I will always say I am a designer, and then I'm always looking to become a better designer. But I'll never, all my friends will say I have a big ego, but I'll never call myself a designer because I've had the benefit of working with them. So I've seen people who are really good. And I'll give you a quick story. When I was in undergrad, I was a comp sci major, but they let me take a few design courses. And I didn't have to take the prerequisites because I had a portfolio, so I couldn't help myself. Designing left to right. And so they were like, oh,
and wasn't that an idea?
Yeah. Well, and they're saying, you're good enough. You can take the 300 level art class. That was graphic design. So I took it. And this particular year, the professor was out on maternity leave. So we had an adjunct come in. I was super bummed because this is like the professor everyone wants. And I thought it was so cool that I was getting into her class. But the adjunct was really cool in that she brought in a bunch of industry leaders. And she brings in the creative director from Discovery Channel. And this guy comes in and he looked at our portfolio and said, okay, you guys are really good. There's some real talent here. So I'm going to take a shot on you guys. There's like 24 of us in the class. He says, I'm doing a nationwide corporate 3-on-3 basketball tournament with Nike for philanthropy, raising money. And Nike's running the whole thing. And we need a logo. We don't have one. So you guys, one of the 24 of you is gonna win. So one logo, and Nike, this is gonna be an official Nike logo. And Nike's gonna print it on bags, swags, basketballs, the whole thing. It's gonna be on the court, and then it's executives, it's corporate 3-on-3, but it's executives from like the Fortune 100. So the biggest CEOs in the world are gonna have your logo. This is cool. Of course, long story short, I win, but I'm not the best designer in that class. There's these two women who are way better than I am. And I've been looking up to them, and I'm kind of like always peeking over their monitors, see what they're designing and how they're doing it, trying to learn from them. But I win, they don't win. That's upsetting to everybody except me. Just like, holy shit, I won. But the thing that changed my life, and this woman will never know that she changed my life with this comment, because I didn't even realize it till years later. She said it sank in me to my deepest core, and then eventually I was like, oh shit. But she comes up to me, she goes, Martin, she's like, I don't think your design was better than mine. And I'm thinking, yeah, maybe it's her, so I'm happy I won. But she said, your design wasn't better than mine. She's like in my face with a finger. She says, but you sold it better than I did. Like I told a story about my design, and that's what won. And I was like, so years later, I'm like, shit. And sorry for cursing. Design.
Go ahead, curse. That's you.
I articulated the vision for this thing in a way that she couldn't do. And that's what won. So it's like, yes, 50%, we had to go head to head 50-50. She beat me on design, but the other 50, I think demolished her on narrative. So it's like at the end, it's like 70-30, like she didn't stand a chance. I didn't know that. And so again, I think designers have to be, when you go into a crit or you're going to get some design feedback, like you got to be really good at articulating why you made the design decisions you did and why your design is the best. Because I don't like this idea of like, when you work with a designer, like, oh, let me get 3 options and bring them back to you. I think that's bullshit. I think that's about a bad designer. As a great designer, there are no 3 options. This option is the only option, because if there was a better option, I would have designed it. But like, you can't have a different thing. I didn't pick purple instead of blue because they could either work. Purple is the one that wins because purple is better than blue for these reasons. And I didn't just pick any purple. This shade of purple because this shade of purple, this hex value is better than the thousands of other purples, lighter or darker on the spectrum. And I got to explain that to you. When you do that, your design wins every single time.
how is your storytelling better? Like, what did you do different in the storytelling? That
Yeah. Well, one, there's a few tricks that I learned over time. You might have an international audience with this podcast, and they're going to be frustrated with me because I talk really fast. And so if English isn't your native language, you're missing every other word I've said. And I apologize. I'm obviously aware of the issue. People have obviously brought it up to me, but I'm not changing it because the net value of speaking fast for me outweighs the negative of you not catching every word I say. Because when I speak fast, I've got the hands, you can feel the passion and energy where it doesn't matter what he said.
Yeah.
You know, he believes it. He has confidence and conviction in it, and there's no getting him off of this. So there's a level of like authority that happens in that. And there's a level of like, wow, this dude really, she's buying his own bullshit here, which, if you're not going to buy it, why would anybody else? So that's one little trick that I've learned. And but I mean, that's me naturally. I'm naturally a fast talker, naturally talk with my hands. But then the other is what I call evidence-based design. It's the ability to go through top to bottom, left to right, pixel for pixel, why you made every choice. Why that border radius? Border radius, 12 pixels. Why 12? Why not 11? Why not 10.75? Like, why 12? And if you can't, and you don't have to spend 40 hours explaining the evidence. If I called one thing out and you didn't have an answer for it, right? You're like, I don't know, look good. I don't know what, Eventbrite does. That's not an answer, right? Tell me why. Give me the border radius. If it's too curved, it looks unprofessional. If it's too straight edge, it looks too old. When I curve it just right, at this particular one, you get a little sprinkle of modernness with a little bit of edge, and it makes people feel a little bit more comfortable, confident, whatever. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. Like, I don't want my website to look like it's from the 90s, what happens at a 90-degree angle. I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard, or that it's a consumer app with like a 40 pixel border radius, but like at 12, like I get a little sprinkle of like I'm hip and I'm cool, but I don't look stodgy and old. Like, I buy it. I'm in. Like, let's move on to the next topic. Again, I feel for someone who is a great designer, who is more of an introvert, more soft-spoken. It's not to say that you can't design, but like whatever your ambitions are, if they are to be, a founder, or to, beat out that subpar designer who's went up against you for the logo contest for Nike, like it's not impossible. You just have a harder uphill battle. And I think about uphill battles as like, you've got an incline, right? And so the job is to reduce your incline. And then we're all pushing our own boulders up that incline. You want the smallest boulder possible. And all you've done when you are soft-spoken, or you don't feel like you need to defend your work, you just created a bigger, heavier boulder for you. I'm not saying that you can't get to the top of the mountain. I'm just saying I want to get there a little bit easier because my boulder is not as heavy. And so just do things that make your boulder less heavy. You don't have to follow any of my advice. Just find out what's your boulder and how you make your boulder smaller.
Yeah, it's just a weird tangent, but we'll come back to related to being passionate was like being soft spoken. I'm sort of not necessarily. I talk a lot about things that I really want. I'm really passionate about, but I'll relate to other fields. I'm kind of introverted in that. So does that make a difference?
I think it does. But again, it doesn't make it impossible. It doesn't mean that the outspoken person always wins and the soft-spoken person never wins. I think most people would agree that the outspoken person in a meeting generally is heard, whether annoyingly or not. And the soft-spoken person is generally not heard, right? For better or worse. What can we do? You can have two things you could do here, or you could do nothing. That's always one option. So that's three things. But you could fight the system. Hey, it's not fair. Like, the loudest person in the room shouldn't be the one that's heard, and the softest person in the room shouldn't be the one that's ignored. You can have that argument all day long. Or you could just say, hey, there's a game being played here. There's rules to the game. And I understand how that person's winning because they're playing to those rules, and you could accommodate. And again, I don't want to ask you to change who you are, what you believe, or like, who you are at your core, but maybe just speak a little louder. Maybe, get a little more energy and passion, because that's the game. Because if you try to change the rules, some people change the rules, and it's amazing when they do it. Rosa Parks is a great person who said, no, I'm changing the rules, and the world is a better place for it. But you have to ask yourself, like, are you going to go in on that fight, or are you just trying to win the local contest? you're just trying to win the logo contest, speak louder. If you're trying to say, hey, every meeting across every corporate boardroom in the entire world should be more just, more equitable, dude, if you win it, that's friggin' awesome. But it's going to take such the amount of energy and force to do it. And if you do win it, that's incredible, but you're not going to win the logo because that's like, that closes in like, an hour. Okay? You're not going to change all of corporate meeting dynamics in the next 60 minutes. So I think that's why I get a little hung up when someone kind of raises their hand and say, hey, the game is flawed, the rules are flawed, or like the process is flawed. It's like 1000% agree with you, but we've got 58 minutes left in this meeting. What do we want to tackle here? We want to ship the logo, or we want to like figure out how to fix all meetings going forward?
How does the storytelling translate into product design? Like logos are a different animal altogether. I think I'll not touch a lot about that, but like product specifically, like we've seen this with incredible companies like Airbnb. Brian is a great designer. How does that storytelling aspect come in?
Yeah, well, this would be a nice place for me to self-promote and plug my current startup.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so agree.com, everybody. free signature for everyone. No, but we just raised $3 million for it, right? So a lot of storytelling has to go into that pitch. Right? Pitch and storytelling, they're synonymous, same word. But also when I'm talking to prospective customers, I have to sell them on this vision, this solution to their problem. So I have to remind them of their problem. And then I have to tell them that this is the answer to that problem. And then that's an invitation to learn more. So I think the first thing that most people get wrong about sales and pitching, at least personal experience, is that the first conversation the goal isn't to get the sale or to get the investment from the investor. It's to buy more time. So the first conversation is just to give me 5 more minutes, 30 more minutes. At the end of that, when I bought more time, that's when we close, right? You get the customer, you get the investment, whatever it is. But in the beginning, I just need more time with you. I only have a very short window before you blow me off. Let me just buy your attention where you're like, I'm listening. I think about product design the same way. When a customer or user, whoever it might be, comes to your website, you've got a small window of time before they hit the X button, before they go to a different browser, before they open up their phone and check Twitter or whatever it might be, before the next distraction hits. What you need to do right away, right out of the gate, grab them, buy more time. Once you've done that, right, they're using it, they're accomplishing their task. Can't get them to accomplish that task, they're just going to move on to the next thing. So when we're pitching agree, right, it's a lot about where's the world today, where's the world tomorrow, and then why is this particular product better? And one thing I did at a conference that I just spoke at, where I was introducing the product for the first time, I didn't even know I was going to say this, so it just kind of hit me while I got on stage. I just looked at the audience, and I could tell they're like, "Oh, this guy's going to pitch us his company. Like, this is a good chance to like snooze. Let me check Twitter. Let me check my email. Right? Like, let me ignore this guy." I had to get him. I had to hook him. I had to get the ears up. So it just hit me. And I looked at and I didn't know how it was going to land. I didn't know if people were going to boo, whatever. So I got on stage and I just said, so we're doing e-signature, which is DocuSign. We're doing it better. And most people do not like DocuSign. And they don't know why they don't like it. They just kind of dislike it. There's a bunch of villain brands like that. If I say Jira, most people are like, oh. If I say, Microsoft Teams, they get upset. But DocuSign's like that. And so I got up on stage and I just started with, today is the last day you'll ever pay for DocuSign again. And the crowd just started roaring. We started clapping because it's a villain brand. They're like, yeah, we don't ever want to pay for DocuSign. We hate DocuSign. None of them know why they hate it. Just hate it. But it now, from a storytelling perspective, it doesn't matter what I'm building, what I'm selling. Nobody cares. All they care is you're not the thing that I hate. So now they're listening, right? But it doesn't mean that they buy my product or they use my product. It means that I got more time with them. They're not looking at their phone. They're not reading their emails. They're not paying attention. And then I go into the whole, hey, at the end of every signature, you ever notice someone has to pay someone? But like, why is payments and invoicing so disconjected? We bring them all together, all in one. Then they're like, oh, okay, I do have that problem. When I do send a signature, I do have to collect payment. Now you have to go to another tool to make an invoice, another tool to get payment. And I never know when the payment's coming. They're like, okay, I have this problem. But I don't get any of that if I don't grab their attention. So I think like, when we're talking about like our landing pages, our home pages, our onboarding experience, these are all mechanisms to buy more time, to get people through a funnel of some sort.
How do you like buy more time? Like with the with the example of you speaking at the conference, you were able to like physically see how people reacted to what you were doing and how they reacted to what you were speaking. But when you're building a product, how do you predict what the person will do when?
Yeah, right. So the two questions there, right? How do I I was in person at the conference. I could I could hear the class. I could see the eyeballs come up. I could see the phones go down. I got it.
Yes.
When?
Yeah.
We can do that on our products, our web apps, or our mobile apps, right? Analytics in tracking software, so we can see where they bounce, where they churn, time on site, if they click this button or that button, where most people go up, if they unsubscribed, if there's open rates. There's a lot of data that we can look at. So we can get the same impression that we get in real life that we get digitally. So that's one. And then the second part of your question, that one is a lot of pattern recognition, right? I'm a big fan. If you had so I sold a company to Twitter, and then after I left, everyone was like, "Why just leave Twitter?" This is the early days before Elon in 2012, so a long time ago, 12 years. But we were like, "Why are you leaving Twitter?" Well, I got this once in a lifetime opportunity to go work at the White House in the Obama administration. And when I was there, they had a big problem where you're not there's a federal regulation that limits you from talking on any one product to more than I forget what the specific number is, but a certain amount of U.S. citizens. You can't interview them without going through a whole bunch of paperwork. So I'm just going to make up a number. Say it's like 60. Right? You can't talk to more than 60 people. It's kind of hard to do user research on like that small of a number, and so the problem that they always had, they always came up against. And I was just kind of new kid on the block, and I was like, hey, here's what I would do. Instead of talking to 60 users about, I don't know, filing taxes to the IRS, why don't you talk to 60 researchers who have each talked to 10,000 users and just research the research, and then you would get all the information from them. So if you can only talk to 60 people, don't talk to 60 people, talk to 60 people who also themselves talk to 10,000 people. What do you get? 60,000. That's a much better number. So when I think about like our products and our users, I'm thinking like, okay, how do I use, again, pattern recognition to know like what users are most likely to do, where they're most likely to fall short. I think you eventually get to be a power user yourself, where I need a great designer, someone who goes through a product and doesn't go through it as themselves. What they would do, they're able to context to say, hey, I'm going to go through it as a 47-year-old Black female living in Chicago, making $180,000 a year. And then 10 seconds later, I'm going to do it as a 21-year-old Hispanic male making $40,000 a year working in the construction industry. And you're able to go through both paths without ever speaking to them. Because you've seen some version of that persona do a path similar to this path before. Because the reality is, no matter what you're doing, you're most likely working on something where something like this has been done before, some version of this problem, right? Not in this time with this technology against this competitor in this market, but some version of like onboarding or payment flows. Like they're just not that different from one another.
It's like that's a good point. How do you really get into someone else's shoes per se when building them?
Yeah, I think this is when they say designer's greatest tool is empathy. That's what I think that's how I translate it. That's what it means to me. And I think that's something that takes a lot of practice. And you have to be, when I say something takes a lot of practice, well, you need pattern recognition to win. You need a lot of practice to gain pattern recognition. And the way that you get a lot of pattern practice is you fail a bunch. I think a lot of people, what I get frustrated with their generational differences is folks now, they come out and they're like, oh, I want to be great and amazing right out of the gate. So you're doing a podcast here, and I don't know how long you've been doing it or what your reach is, your size. I was just like, hey, you're doing it. You want me on it. I'm here to help at that time. But anyone who I've talked to that's built a massive audience of 1 million subscribers or more, they all have the exact same experience. They're embarrassed by the first 100. The 100 videos, the 100 recordings, they're absolutely mortified. They're like, don't even go back and look. They also none of them delete. They leave the first 100. They're so embarrassed. And I think that you need to be able to fail, to be embarrassed. Like the best you can do today won't look anything like the best you can do tomorrow if you keep doing that. And so I think with this, like going through, like, yes, I just talked about being able to context switch between who I am, between this African-American woman in Chicago, between this Hispanic male in California. But the first few times I do it, like I get it way off, I'm wrong, the data shows that I'm wrong. I actually talk to a real user where I learn new things. Like, oh, man, every time I learn, I'm like, okay, that cohort does something differently. And then those cohorts change over time. A 47-year-old woman today in Chicago is different than a 47-year-old woman in Chicago 12 years ago. As technology changes, culture changes, expectations change.
This is a great point. I think one question like related to exactly the same point that it's been on my mind for almost, I don't know, 6 months now, and I haven't received a good answer or a good enough answer on that. I think you'll be able to do that, but let's see. Do you think like people, if we like all over the world, if we just put people in a group, do you think most of them are similar in their way of thinking? Are they more similar in their way of thinking or more different in their way of thinking?
So it's a great question. And if you go high level enough up, we might not think about the same things the same way, but we all do things the same way. So very common. So there's some patterns that no matter where you live, no matter who you are, you follow them. One of them is that we all congregate around people like us. Now, a few people are watching like, I don't do that. You know who they congregate around? They congregate around people who say, I don't do that. So you've just proven your point. There's a great movie that I love called, it's an old one, so anybody under the age of 30 won't know it, but it's called SLC Punk. And it's this anarchist in Salt Lake City, and he's like fighting against the man. He's a rebel, and he's got the spiked hair and the nose ring, and he just looks different than all the Mormons in Utah. But there's a moment where he has this realization. He's at some underground club at a church late at night at a rave. And he looks around, and everyone around, yes, he looks different than all the Mormons walking around Utah, but when he looks at the rave, everyone looks like him. Everyone's wearing the same black boots with the same pink dyed hair, with the same nose ring, and he realized, oh, he's fighting conformity. He is conformity just among his group, his peer group. He's aware of the uniform. His uniform to fight uniforms is a uniform. And I'm like, oh, wow. So this is something like humans do. We always congregate around people like ourselves. Now, there might be one group who is very open-minded, and they're all open-minded, and they're all wanting to embrace different religions and diversities and genders. And there's another group who they've decided that they're racist and they're transphobic, but they're doing the same thing. They're congregating around like-minded people, even though the things they believe are fundamentally different, right? So your beliefs can be different, but your behaviors are the same. So I think to your question, our beliefs and our actions could be different, but our behaviors are all they're very human. One exercise that I do with people, most people do not like this. They get very uncomfortable. But I run them through an exercise because they're like, no, this is not true. I'm different. Right now, humans are very selfish. They're like, no, I'm not selfish. I donate. I do philanthropy. You're selfish. And here's the exercise I take them through. Okay, where this is a fictitious situation, but there's a terrorist group, and they're going to drop a nuclear bomb on a city, and it's going to be random, but you get to pick one city that it definitely will not drop on. And now there's two usual answers for this. It's either the city you're currently in, so like New York, right? Because I don't want to give up, or it's the city where the majority of your family lives, say your kids, your wife, like if you're traveling for the weekend, or like your mom and your dad. So you've decided, like, let's just say, I'm in Iowa, and I picked Des Moines, Iowa. Oh, I don't want to hear as well. My family is where I live with my son, my baby, my daughter, my dog. I don't want them to get hit by the bomb. But that is the practical answer, right? Like, wouldn't you pick the most populous city? Somewhere in Pakistan or China or India, where you're saving the most amount of people. Like, wouldn't that be the more logical choice? Because then if I go one step further, hey, that city, you get to pick one country where they don't drop this bomb. Most people in the United States are going to pick the USA because it's the greatest ever. But again, very selfish answer to pick, right? And then if I were to say, hey, you get to pick, one planet where obviously you're going to pick Earth. But if you go out, we start with our super concentrated communities. So like at home, like my home, and then it's my neighborhood. Right? So first it's my actual home. Don't hurt it. Then it's don't hurt my neighborhood, New York City. And then it's don't hurt my country, USA. Right. And then it's don't hurt my species, human. Humans are more important than dolphins and tigers and lions. We'll kill them all. And even humans. And then it's don't hurt my planet. Right. And then don't hurt my solar system and then my universe. But like it all comes back at the end of the day to Marty's little 1,000 square foot shoebox of an apartment. And so that is like a constant with humans. When we understand that, it's like, okay, we're all the same. Yeah, some people are a little more racist than other people. Some people are a little more open-minded than other people. At the end of the day, all our behaviors are very human behaviors. They're very selfish behaviors. But that just leads back to, 40,000 years of like survival training. Like this is just evolution, right? Like if people forget that evolution only exists because like you're the ones that survive everything else before you died. So if you really want to think like you're a good person, you're only here because your ancestors were like the meanest and cruelest. Like when two cavemen went head to head, your ancestor won, and they didn't win by being nice, right? They won because they bashed somebody's head in and they made it. So like we are the result of survivors who like did some pretty horrific things to get here. And then hopefully, we progress and we get better and use technology to not have to do those brutal attacks anymore. There's other exercise that I love. Okay, so we have a map, right? World map. And I ask you, where is Australia, right? You kind of have an idea of where it is on the map. Bottom right-hand corner, right?
Yeah.
So Alaska's top left-hand corner. South America's kind of like a little off to the left. Yeah. You can picture it, right? My question is, you and I, worlds apart, how do we see the same map? How do we have, because there is no flat version of the Earth where Australia sits in the bottom right-hand corner. You and I both put in the same place. So where did that come from? And where did that mental model arrive from? And if you go back far enough, it's the first person to map the globe. What did they, it was the Spanish and the Italians. But what did they do? They put home at the center. So Spain and Italy live at the center of that map, and then they mapped everything around it. And now, hundreds of years later, you and I know where Australia is because of some selfish early explorer that put home at the center. The other exercise that's really fun on this similar topic is if you go to Google Maps, satellite view, and you go to the center. You know what's at the center? The United States of America. Why? Because, hey, that's where the Google engineers live. But if you go actual center, it's middle of nowhere, Kansas. You know why? Because Kansas is in the dead center of the United States. And it's a coincidence. If you go to the actual center, it's a house. It's the home of where the engineer that mapped it lived when he grew up. He put his home where he grew up at the center of the universe or the planet on Google Maps because he could, and he knew nobody would go looking for it. That is like, it's just so like when we constantly think everything revolved around. Right? In the beginning, we thought everything revolved around the Earth. We still think everything revolves around our solar system. We're like the greatest, smartest. If there were other life out there, right? We always just think that like everything revolves around humans, but it's just a very human thing to do. A lot of people always say, hey, we shouldn't find intelligent life out in the outer space because if we did, they would be so smart and so advanced, they'd squish us like ants. Or they would do what we did to the Native Americans or what we did with slavery. Like they wouldn't treat us well. But I would argue, or even AI, hey, what if AI got really smart? Wouldn't they like enslave us? It's like, no, you think that. You think that a smarter, more powerful being would do all these horrible things because that's what humans do. That's a human trait. That doesn't mean that that's an AI trait. Well, maybe if a human trains an AI, then that's a problem. But that doesn't mean it's an alien trait. And it's a human trait to do these horrible, barbaric things. But what if a non-human were smarter, faster? It might not do these like bad human things.
Behaviorally speaking, most humans are similar. Then what really differentiates the, they're like a natural smartness level which people have, like they are genetically, some people are genetically smarter than others. And then there are some people who like become sort of relatively smart. Like I'd say like just to simplify, for the sake of simplification of the mission, like people who or founders or people who have built some certain stuff. Like I'd say Elon and who else? Like so many people. Elon, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. These people. What differentiates the way that they perceive things versus how others? Because if their way of thinking is similar to.
Yeah. So, there's a sense you kind of touch on this of like, a biological level of intelligence, and it's going to be yours and my ceiling. You can only go so far. Some people will call it like IQ. So there's a ceiling. My IQ is less than Elon Musk. I will never be, no matter what I do, no matter how many books I read or how many trainings, or how many PhDs I get, I will not be as smart as Elon Musk. I'll always be more intelligent than I am. And there's biological factors that put that into play. So we have to realize that. But to your question about like what makes you a founder, do you have to be born with the biological lottery card? No. You have to understand the game. You have to understand that intelligence is a huge reducer of your boulder. Right? Elon's boulder is much smaller than yours, and I think he has such a significant amount of intelligence. But what could you have to offset the fact that you feel like you maybe you don't compete intellectually at that level? Cleverness, back to design, creativity. You put cleverness and creativity with moderate intelligence in a room with the most intelligent, no creativity and ingenuity and no creativity, you win all day long. And this is me going against a better designer, right? Like my level of ingenuity and creativeness, my narrative destroyed her skill. It just didn't matter that her skill was greater than my skill. So I think like find the things that make your boulder smaller while you're going up that mountain. And I think like add them together, right? Converge things. Be more dominant in other places. And then the other thing I think about with your founder question, something I thought was really interesting, because you mentioned Jeff Bezos. If you look at the great founders of tech startups, your Zuckerbergs, your Steve Jobs, your Bill Gates, none of them, only one of them was high school valedictorian. And when we're going through high school, especially in the States, they put that as the determining factor of like who's going to win in our careers, in our life. The valedictorian, the smartest person, the person with the best grades is going to somehow win. Valedictorians actually don't go on to do things of great substance. They go on to have careers, and they buy a house, they have a family, but they don't start. There's only been one. And Jeff Bezos was his high school valedictorian. He's the only one. None of the others. So this metric that teachers and parents put on, hey, aspire to be the valedictorian, is actually incorrect. If you look at the data, are the Zuckerbergs and the Musks in the job, why are they now valedictorians? They fight against the rules it means to make valedictorian. And when they fight it, they don't get the certain grade, and they don't care. To them, the B and the A was irrelevant. Maybe some parts of their ego care when they're younger, but like because they fight that system and they fight that convention, they don't go on to meet valedictorian. Because to get to valedictorian, like yes, there's a little bit of intelligence that's there, but it's a series of steps you do, and you hit them all, and then you're fighting against 3 other people who also hit those steps, and it's marginal who wins at the end. But winning valedictorian, at least in the tech game, it's almost a red flag. You told me you're valedictorian. Just statistically speaking, probabilities are very low. You're going to go on to do anything of substance.
I don't know. I just like hate school.
Most really great tech founders hate school. Some of the most famous ones drop out of your Harvard and your other collegiate institutions.
One question which I like to end with, like I've been into startups, we see all these things since I was like 11. What do you think is one fact that will blow 11-year-old me mind?
I think the valedictorian one blows my mind. The other one, I don't know if it's one fact to blow people's minds, but something I think about a lot is that the makeup of CEOs. I don't like it. They're mostly white men. They're mostly over 6 foot tall. They're mostly named John. Like they have these very common attributes, and I think like 7 of them played an athletic sport in college. Right. So it's like, so think about that for a second. Because I know like the common thing is like, oh, if you're a white male, like you have the ultimate privilege. I want to take 2 steps back. I'm not going to argue that, especially if you look at the complexion here, because that would be inappropriate. But the ultimate privilege, if we talk about like fundraising and VC capital. You could tell me, hey, Marty, it's not fair. All the VC capital goes to mostly white men. I was like, yes, you're right. That is not fair. We should change that. We should do a whole bunch of things. But I want to take a step back for a second, and I want to remember all rock to push up that hill. And yours is actually, or ours in the United States is actually smaller. Because if you look at the VC funding, you say, well, okay, predominantly goes to white men. Got it. What country does it predominantly go to? The US. So if you're having this conversation with me and you're in the United States of America, you've already won the friggin' lottery. Who cares about your race or gender? Like, most of the money goes here. And then we'll go one step further. What two cities does almost all the capital go to? New York and San Francisco. So if you're having this conversation with me in New York, in the United States, you've already won the friggin' lottery. Doesn't even matter about gender, height, name. But then I want to say, no, which of those two cities, which one gets like 95% of the fund? One city, San Francisco. So if you're born in the United States, you live in San Francisco, and if like you won the friggin' lottery above everybody, if you're a white male named John who's 6'7", who's a varsity athlete in Poland, you're screwed. Like you're screwed, right? Like you've lost, like you just got everything going against you. Whereas if you're so like right, think about privilege. I'm not saying like fight the system and like don't be Rosa Parks. I'm saying like look at your boulder and look at your incline and then look around you and like, hey, you might already be in a really good spot, like just globally speaking. So let me end it there. Come to my next one. Hey, I really appreciate the time and so out so abruptly.
Yep, no problem. I think this being great.
All right.